Welcome again, and happy Father's Day again to all the dads that are here. When I was a child, I believed that I was the absolute best at everything. Like, you name it, I thought I was the best at it. I believed I was the smartest. I believed I was the most athletic kid out of anybody. I believed I was the most handsome kid. I believed I was the nicest kid. I believed I was the most special kid. You name it, I believed it. I thought I was the best at all of it. And it was because my parents told me so. Specifically, my mom, who's not here, my mom would specifically always tell me how special I was. In fact, she still kind of does that today. Every sermon I've ever given is the best sermon she's ever heard, every single Sunday. So after a while, and my parents would affirm me, just like any good parent does, is you affirm your kids. Affirming your kids and speaking positive attributes to them has tremendous benefits. And I constantly do the same thing for my kids. I tell them how awesome they are. I cheer them on. When they do their sports, I'm cheering on the things that they are doing. I say that they are smart and they are kind and they are amazing. In fact, sometimes when it comes to sports, I cheer them on and I want them to win more than they even care about winning. A couple weeks ago, my kids had their field day, I believe is what it's called. That's what we called it when I was a kid, where they basically do a bunch of competition to get a ribbon. And Savannah is my middle child, and she is our very athletic child, just naturally. When she runs, she's just faster than everybody. It's just how it is with her. So we were they were doing a race, a lap, and I watched like 10 to 12 of these races, and the parents are cheering, but no one's going overboard because it's for kids. And then all of a sudden, my daughter started racing, and one of the moms that were there started cheering for their daughter, but like way over the top. It was like, come on, get her, catch her, you can get her, go get her, like talking about Savannah. And I'm filming it, I can show you this later. And I start getting competitive. And so after a while, I'm like, come on, Savannah, you can do it. And Savannah is just trolling this kid behind her because she's like fixing her hat and she keeps looking back, and she easily killed her. And in my pride, I took the camera and looked at the mom and said, see? And then I went back. She didn't hear me, but I was so competitive. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited for her to destroy this kid. She's going to make a lot of parents mad over her time. But anyways, I cheer on my kid. But here's what happens. As you grow up, something starts to happen. You go from believing that you are the coolest, you are the best, you are the smartest, you are whatever, insert that, to actually realizing that you aren't. And just because you eventually join a team, or you go to school, or you go to church, and you meet other people, and you compare yourself to other people, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I am not the smartest. I am not the best at this sport. Oh, I am not the cutest. And then that's when all of us, and it happens to all of us, we all start dealing with self-esteem and insecurities. And that's completely normal. We all do that. Unless you are a complete narcissist, you will deal with insecurities in your life. So, how can we not? I mean, we have celebrities that just show us what beauty is on magazine covers or on TV and the media, and that beauty is not even real. It's made up by a team and things like that. But we see that, so how do we not have insecurities? We have friends that are more successful than we are, that make a little more money than we do, that have a better job, that have a better marriage than we do. So how do we not have insecurities? We have social media that we see everyone's highlight reel constantly. How do we not have insecurities at times? It's completely normal. It's impossible to avoid the triggers that affect our insecurities. So as adults, we tend to, or what we need to do eventually, is learn how to negate those triggers. And we need to negate them, because if we don't, our insecurities can just pile up and they can act out in our lives in very unhealthy ways. And the more I've learned about insecurities, specifically my insecurities, the more I've realized that it's kind of just the flip side of pride. And that's what we're talking about this entire series, is pride. We've been talking about our Achilles heel. We said pride is everyone's Achilles heel. And we say Achilles heel, it's a vulnerability or a weakness in spite of overall strength. The Greek myth of Achilles heel, Achilles is dipped into a pool that makes him invincible, but his mom holds just the heel. Everything is invincible except for his heel. So now we have that term where all of us have an Achilles heel in our life, especially around our character. And what we talked about last week is pride is all of our Achilles heel. It shows itself differently, but it always starts that way. Pride is not just being cocky. It's not just being arrogant about yourself. And pride's not even just being proud of like your kids or your job or who you are. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about pride. When we say pride, it is a preoccupation of your own importance. Whether it's for the better or for the worse, it's a preoccupation on yourself. Pride comes out differently for all of us, and it's a problem. The solution for pride is humility. It's what we talked about last week if you weren't here. Humility is not just self-deprecating, not just putting yourself down. It's not thinking less of yourself. Humility is simply thinking of yourself less. That's what we talked about last week. And I was thinking about this week. I don't know if any of you are gardeners in the room. I know some of you are because you give me jalapenos and tomatoes and strawberries. And if you're a gardener and you don't do that, then shame on you. Help your pastor out. But I'm not much of a gardener, okay? And there's one real reason why I don't like gardening, and it's because of weeds. Weeds are everywhere. They just show up, and then I've learned two things. One, that you can't just pull them out. You got to get to the root of it, or it'll grow right back immediately. And two, they are everywhere, and they always come back. No matter what you do about it, they are everywhere, and they always come back. They come back so quickly. And when I think of pride in my life, that's what I think of, weeds. It's like, if I don't get to the source of that pride in my life, then eventually it's going to come right back. And even if I do get to the source of it, I always have to keep getting them out because pride keeps showing up in my life. It's a never-ending process of pulling pride out of my life. Pride constantly pops up in my marriage. It pops up in my relationship with my kids, pops up in my friendships, and it pops up here in my job. And when I choose the path of pride, here's what I'm really doing. Here's what we're all doing. Deep down, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to glory. It's a shortcut to purpose. It's a shortcut to meaning. It's a shortcut that always leaves us feeling empty eventually. That's why the Bible talks so much about pride. And I could give you a list of verses they talked about, but I'm just going to tell you one right now in James chapter 4. James here is actually quoting a proverb, James chapter 4, verse 6. It says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. And I don't fully know what it means for God to oppose me, but I do know I don't want him to do that. And I don't fully know what it means for God to be in favor of me, but I know I do want him to do that. So James says God opposes the proud, that when we are in our pride, he opposes us, but he shows favor to the humble. He shows favor to the humble. I heard this analogy years ago from my old pastor who heard it from another pastor, and it was about dating. It was about specifically his daughter dating, and he said that his daughter was on the ground one day, about 3 years old, and there was all these crumbs on the floor from lunch that day, and his daughter just started eating all the crumbs off the floor. And the dad came over and said, no, you don't need to do that, and picked his daughter up and opened the fridge and said, look at all of this food your dad has gotten you. Opens the pantry, look at all this food. You don't have to settle for the crumbs on the floor. I'll give you food if you want food. I'll give it to you. You don't need to eat the crumbs. And the analogy, the first time I heard it, was about dating, that we don't have to settle for, when we're in our dating life, the crumbs of this life, but we can know that God has something in store for us. But the same works when it comes to our humility. God wants us to eat from the feast of purpose and not the floor of pride. Some of us are clinging to pride the same way a child eats off the floor when our father says, trust me, I have prepared a feast for you. Don't strive for pride, but in humility, walk with me. And pride isn't just a you problem. It's not just a me problem. It's an everybody problem. Doesn't matter how religious you are. Doesn't matter your status. Doesn't matter how much money you make. Doesn't matter your upbringing. All of us have a pride problem. It shows itself differently for each one of us, but we all have it. And it's not even a new problem. Any person that has ever lived has dealt with pride. Even the people closest to Jesus in the Bible still dealt with pride. You would think the people that hung out with Jesus every day, they might be the ones that have figured it out, but even they dealt with pride. At one point during the heart of Jesus' ministry, they have been seeing him heal the sick. They've been seeing him, all these sermons that talking about blessed are those who are poor in spirit. So I hear all this stuff. And they witness all this. And at one point they still ask him, hey, Jesus, in your kingdom, who's going to sit next to you? Is it me? Is it going to be John? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be, who's going to sit next to you? They would argue about who would sit next to him in glory. That's pride. And then another time they say this in Matthew chapter 18, starting at verse 1. The heart of Jesus' ministry, they asked him this. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Now, I don't really know the true heart behind this question that they're asking. I don't really know exactly why they're doing this, but here's what I kind of get, because maybe this is probably why I would ask it. You ever ask a question that you're really just looking for a compliment? Like you're really just looking to hopefully get something, but hey, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Like, would it be like maybe the people that left their family and their jobs to serve you? Would that be the greatest in the kingdom? Would it be the people that are with you at all times and serving with you and watching you and taking notes and are going to tell everybody about this 1,000 years? Are those people that are greatest in the kingdom of heaven? I can see them asking this, but even though I don't necessarily know why, I know they didn't think this would be the answer. Here's how Jesus responds. Verse 2, he called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. You want to be great? You see this child? You need to be like him. You have to have childlike faith. You have to bring yourself to the lowly position of a child. You have to be humble like a child. And when I read this, two things I think about. One, when I was a kid, I felt like all I was told was I had to grow up. And Jesus is saying you have to be like a kid. When I was a kid, I remember just being like, I didn't feel like I was going to be smart enough till I grew up. And I would daydream about one day having a job and not being in school. I would daydream about being married one day and having kids. All I wanted to do was grow up as a kid. But Jesus is saying, no, you have to act like a child. Number two, when I hear this and I hear Jesus saying you need to put the lowly position of a child, be humble like a child, I think, what kids are humble? I don't know your kids. My kids are not humble. At our family service that we do at 9:30 for everyone that's serving, I asked Ashley, who's our Impact Kids director, hey, would you describe the kids upstairs as humble? And she said, not a single one of them. None of your kids are humble according to her. I've never gone home from a long day where I am just exhausted, and my kids and all their love and humility have come up to me and said, you know what, Dad, I see how tired you are. Why don't you just go take a seat? We'll take care of the dishes for you. We'll do dinner, and we'll put ourselves to bed. You just relax. You've had a long day. Not once has that ever happened in my life. If that happened in your family, then you're a liar. That did not happen in your family. No kid is humble. I've never met a child that's humble. So when Jesus says you need to be humble like a child, the lowly position of a child, have childlike faith, what in the world is he trying to tell us? And here's what I think he means. I think he means this. Childlike faith is completely dependent on someone else. That's what childlike faith is. My kids never have to worry about the clothes they wear. My kids never have to worry about if they will eat that day. My kids never have to worry about their safety. Everything they have is a result of the love, hard work, and reliance on someone else. God is saying, listen, you don't need to earn my love because you already have it. You wonder how to have access to God? You already have it through me and through the sacrifice that I made for you. You don't need to live your life grasping for the respect of other people. You don't need to live your life trying to exalt yourself. Trust me. Trust what I did for you. Be humble like a child and rest in that truth that you can be fully dependent on me and I will take care of you. Because that's what pride really is. It's really a lack of faith. It's a lack of trusting that God will actually do what he says he's going to do, to lift us up when we are humble. We are restless in our trust, so we reach for purpose ourselves. We reach for that control ourselves. We don't want to be dependent on him, so we cling to pride because we think that gives us a sense of control, but at the end of the day, it leaves us feeling empty because it's a false sense of control. And because we all struggle with that faith, we start to believe the empty promises that pride gives us. So I could give you a list of empty promises that pride gives us, but today I'm just going to tell you 3 of them. 3 empty promises that a lot of us, especially me, tend to believe about pride. 3 empty promises. Number 1, pride promises bigger, but leaves you feeling smaller. Pride promises bigger, but leaves you feeling smaller. So let me ask you a question, and I'm not joking with this question. This is an honest question that I had to wrestle with this week. What is more important to you? Being humble or being seen as humble? What's more important? Actually being humble or everyone thinking you're humble? Because sometimes for me, I'm very concerned about being humble. But other times, I'm way more concerned that I'm seen as humble. Let me give you an example. And I even tell Erica this, and I'm going to have to tell her afterwards. Erica's family's here, so they'll probably tell her. So sometimes at home, one of the chores that I do a lot at home is I'll do the laundry. The reason why I'll do it is because either Monday or Friday is my day off. Tend to be Friday, but sometimes it's Monday. And I'm there all day, and I like watching television shows. So this is a way for me to do the laundry and help out in the house while also sitting on my butt and watching all the shows I want to watch. And I'll mind it. So I'll do it. But putting the clothes away is a whole different ballgame. I don't ever want to put the clothes away. All I want to do is fold them. And every once in a while, I will fold clothes, and I'll take my time and do it. And I have my wife's location on my phone, and I'll check to see where her location is. And sometimes I'll be done, and I'll see she's on her way home. And I know this is going to sound terrible, but forgive me. And I will purposely not put the clothes away so she can see that I did the laundry. I do it sometimes. I know it's not right. That's my pride. But sometimes we're like, oh, she's on her way home. I could get it all done before she gets here, but I'd rather wait. And when she gets here, I'll start acting like I was doing it all of the time. Sometimes I do that because sometimes I want to be seen as humble more than I actually want to be humble. Pride says you need to exalt yourself, and when you do, then you will be bigger. But at the end of the day, it actually makes you feel smaller. And this looks differently for everyone. How do we exalt ourselves? There's going to be a couple of ways we do that. There's the humble brag. Because what the humble brag is, you're trying to sound humble, but you're really just bragging in your humility. I Googled this week examples of humble brags, and I found a bunch of tweets, and I'm just going to read them to you. Here's the first one. It says this: "It always feels a little odd to me when I get recognized randomly in public. I never know what to say. I'm glad it doesn't happen often." Wow, you're just so famous. Man, you're so humble with it. Here's another one. "Will Twitter be available for me in Paris, Milan, or Maldives? I hope so, because it won't be in Hong Kong or Singapore. I mean, I got a lot of places to go. I got extravagant places to go. Wow, you're so awesome." The next one. "I'd be the worst at Price is Right. Brought $20,000 to buy a monitor that was only $350. Man, you have so much money. You just bring 20 grand with you. Wow." And this one was my favorite one. This. "I just did something very selfless, but more importantly, it was genuine, and I know it means a lot to the person in the long run. Hashtag so worth it." You are so humble. A humble brag is people making sure others notice their humility, which is the opposite of being humble. We do that sometimes. Here's another one, the know-it-all. Has ever met the know-it-all? I know I've been the know-it-all before. I've met people who, no matter what the topic is, they know everything about it. I can't teach them anything about it. They know absolutely everything about it. There's nothing I could teach them. And I never found this to be more true than 2 years ago when COVID happened. I had people who had no doctor's degrees, who were not nurses, tell me how viruses work in a way I was like, do you even know that? And then I would talk to my sister-in-law, I have two sister-in-laws who are nurses, one who worked on the COVID wing. So when she told me information, I tend to believe it because I don't know if you know me. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how things work. So I asked her, and she would tell me information, and I would tell people this sometimes, and they would tell me to my face, she's wrong. I know in my lack of a doctor degree and I've been in a hospital twice, so I know how COVID works. I've had people tell me, like, are you crazy? How do you think you know it all? And listen, even if you do know it all, spoiler, you don't know it all, but even if you do, no one wants to be around someone like that. You think you're exalting yourself and making yourself look better, but what you're really doing is separating yourself from everyone else with your perceived enlightenment. And if you continue down that path, you're going to be left feeling very small and very lonely because no one's going to want to be around you when you're the know-it-all. Here's another way we do that, the one-upper. No matter what you say, they one-up you. You tell a story, they have a better story. You go on a trip, they have a better trip. Your kid succeeded, their kid succeeded a little more than your kid succeeded. So, hey, where are you going on vacation? Well, we're just going to go to Ocean City. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I'm going to go to Palm Springs. Like, wow, that's great. Where are you going to go for your anniversary? Just Outback. We like the blue and onions. Like, oh, yeah, we're going to Ruth Chris. Like, okay, you got to one-up everything we say. We do that sometimes. So when pride when people make themselves bigger out of pride, what do all of us naturally do when we are around those people? Naturally, when someone else is trying to bump themselves up in their pride, we step back or we secretly root for them to fail, don't we? It's naturally we do. But what happens when we're around somebody that we think is humble, that we think lives out humility? We want them to succeed. We want them to be lifted up. It's natural. We all do that. And if you don't believe me, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case is a great example. You aren't lawyers, yet everyone cheered for Johnny Depp in this and not Amber Heard. And you know why you did that? Because you saw Amber Heard and said, oh, she didn't even look at the lawyer. She only looks at the jury. She has so much pride. And then Johnny's like, man, he's just so humble. He's so charismatic. So you cheer for him instead of her. Why? We naturally gravitate towards people that are humble and avoid people who have pride. Why do you think we do that? I would argue that is one of the many examples of the stamp of God in our lives. That we naturally, without having to be taught it, will find people that are humble and want them to be lifted up, but we want people that have pride to eventually fail. Peter knew this, and he quotes the book of Proverbs, the same thing that James says. Here's what Peter says at 1 Peter 5. All of you clothe yourself with humility towards one another, because, and here he's quoting Proverbs again, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. If pride is an invitation for God to oppose you, humility is an invitation for God to bless you. Genuine humility. Humility that is confident in who God made us to be so that we can benefit and lift other people up. Yet because of our sin nature, we wrestle with humility because we can't help but believe the empty promise that pride says. The empty promise that says, if I don't elevate myself, then who will? If I don't elevate myself, who will? But here's the promise humility gives us. If I don't elevate myself, God will. That's what humility tells us. That is why humility takes faith. It is faith that God will elevate you when you humble yourself. That's number one. Empty promise number two. Pride promises influence, but can't keep influence. If you are gifted enough or talented enough, you'll get influence. Whatever your job is, whatever you do, if you're gifted enough, you will get influence. And the more gifted you are, the more influence you can get pretty easily. And the more you get initially, the easier it is to have pride to think that we are something special because of it. But you will not keep your influence unless you're humble. I've talked about this podcast plenty of times, but a couple years ago, I listened to a podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And the pastor there, Mark Driscoll, he eventually got let go from his job or demoted, and he eventually quit, and this church fell apart. If you've never listened to it, I would encourage you to listen to it. But what's interesting about this pastor is that he didn't get let go because of infidelity or because of a sin or anything like that. He got let go because he had just too much pride. That's basically the answer. He was too arrogant, he had too much power, and because of that, he got let go, or he got asked to be stepped down. And I was listening to it last year, and I noticed something that was really quick that made me think twice. He was 26, 27 years old, very good preacher, knew how to speak, knew how to lead a church, and his church went from just a couple people in a room to all of a sudden thousands of people at 27 years old. And I saw that, and I listened to that and goes, man, what would happen to me if right when we launched church, all of a sudden, thousands of people were coming? What could happen to my pride if that were to happen? What could happen to your pride if the first thing you do, you're so gifted, all of a sudden it just blows up? I saw that, I was like, oh, I understand how that happens. So what can we do practically to not believe that pride promises influence, but it can't actually keep influence? What can we do practically to not believe this empty promise, but to walk humbly? Here's some things I've learned. Instead of trying to always be right, listen to the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree. I would say especially if you don't agree. Instead of always trying to be right, listen to their perspective. Get really good at asking questions. Get really good at it. Not questions just so you can try to talk about your talking points, but genuine questions because you're trying to learn something new. Get really good at that. Instead of striving for affirmation, encourage someone else. There's a great quote from Harry Truman that I love. It says, you can accomplish anything in life provided you don't mind who gets the credit. Great quote. Imagine if we applied that process to our marriages, to our workplace, to our friendships. This week I listened to a sermon from Andy Stanley talking about humility, and he said something that really made me think twice about a lot of stuff, and I hope it does the same for you. But he said at some point, you're going to walk into a room, and you're going to realize that you have the most influence in that room. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's your home, maybe it's here at church. You're going to walk into a room at some point in your life. It'll happen to all of us. And when we walk in, we're going to realize, oh, what I do has the most influence out of anybody else in this room. And then what he said next really challenged me. I'm going to say it to you too. What you do with that influence matters more than anything. If you take that influence that you have, when you realize you have the most, if you take that influence and you make it all about your glory, it will destroy you. But if you take that influence that you've found out and you lift somebody else up with that influence, not only will you be acting in humility and acting the way Christ calls us to act, but it'll actually feed your soul. Don't believe the lie that pride will get you influence, because it won't. Only humility is the only thing that will keep any influence in your life. So I'm going to give you some homework for this week that I want you guys to really take seriously. And I did it this week, so I'm not telling you to do anything that I wouldn't do. But this week, First homework assignment, I have two things. First thing I want you to do, make a list of everyone that has believed in you in some point in your life. Make a list of all the people that has got you to the position that you are. That when you didn't deserve to be believed in, when you didn't deserve it, they brought you up anyways. Maybe it was a coach. Maybe it was an old boss. Maybe it was a pastor. Maybe it was a mentor of yours. Make a list of those people, those couple people. The first person I thought of at the top of my list was my old pastor, who brought me in as a youth pastor when I had no right to be a youth pastor, who let me preach on a Sunday morning, and I was terrible at preaching, but still let me do it, who encouraged me and got me to the point I am today. Make that list, whoever that is for you. Then this week, I want you to reach out to them, call them, text them, email them, whatever, and let them know that you appreciate them. That you appreciate the humility they showed, because that's what they did, to lift you up instead of exalting themselves. That you appreciate them, because when we show gratitude, gratitude is the key to humility. So this week, find someone that you can reach out to and just say, hey, I appreciate the fact that when I didn't deserve it, you brought me out. This week I sent my pastor a long text. I'm so appreciative of the fact that when I didn't deserve it, you brought me up. That's homework assignment number 1. Homework assignment number 2. Make another list. But this list, I want you to think of the people that you can influence. That whoever those people were for you in homework assignment 1, who can you be for homework assignment number 2? The people that you can lift up, that you can encourage, that you can give a chance when they might not even deserve it yet, but you can lift them up in their lives. Because when you do that, you're practicing humility. You're taking the influence that you have, and you're making someone else better. That's your 2 homework assignments this week. And the last empty promise, and then I'll be done. Pride promises independence, but you need dependence. Pride promises independence, but you need dependence. Pride promises that you will be fully in control, that you will be self-sufficient, that you won't have to rely on anyone, that you can do it all on your own. But we're not called to be independent. We are called to be dependent on our Savior, to humbly sit at his feet in full dependence of him. Psalm 10:4 says this, in his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. So my question as we get ready to close and sing this closing song, where are you tempted to try to grab control? Where are you tempted to make much of yourself? For some of us, we have simply been overcrowding or crowding God out with our independence. We've been crowding God out of our marriages. We've been crowding God out of our jobs. We've been crowding God out of our friendships because we believe that we don't need anyone else. We can be fully dependent on ourselves. But when life gets hard, a lot of us start to realize something. We're not in control. That we have to be dependent on something bigger than us. That we cannot depend on our own strength, but we have to be dependent on them. We are called for full dependence on God, just the same way a child is dependent on others. So this week I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about my job as the pastor here at this church. And I've been in ministry for a long time. We've been in church now for 4 years in September. A year before that, getting ready to launch, and I was a pastor long before that. And I heard a pastor say this, and it's very true. But doing ministry for a long time can really damage your faith. And here's why, and here's what I've learned. The longer I've done this, the better I've gotten at my job. Just like the longer you do a job, the better you get at your job, right? So the longer I've done this, I've learned how to preach. I've learned how to communicate. I've learned how to lead a church. And it gets easier and easier for me to not be dependent on any God, but just simply do ministry by my own strength. Because I've gotten good at it. I kind of know what sermons will work. I know ways to close sermons. I can, if I really wanted to, and I've seen pastors do this, and I've seen why pastors eventually go down a long, dangerous path. I could be fully dependent on my own power to lead a church. You can do it. So this week, I've really been praying. It's something I pray before I get up every Sunday before I preach. I always pray, less of me, more of you. Less of me, more of you. And I found that the times that I really start to take control of ministry or my job or whatever it is that I think God's calling us to do, that's normally the worst season of my ministry career. That anytime I really start to really take control, God does something to make me, remind me mainly, that I'm not in control. That I can't be dependent on my own strength or my own talents that he's given me, but I need to take the gifts he's given me, just like you need to take the gifts that he has given you, and not simply just ride those gifts out because you know how to do it now. You've been doing it for a long time. You know how to be successful now, but take those gifts that he has given you and be fully dependent on him with your next steps. We're all at different stages in life. Some of us are starting our careers, and you're going to eventually grow to be really good at your job. Some of us are at the end of our careers, and we're thinking about what we're going to do next. But no matter where we are, it's all of our temptation to try to take all that control for ourselves. It's our temptation. Whether you're in ministry or whether you do any other job, it's easy for us to take control. There's even times where I've preached and I've started to close and I just started to talk about things I wasn't planning on talking about. And whether it's the Spirit talking through me, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's times that's happened. And it's very easy for me to want to take that control back. Because, man, it feels so much safer when I have control. But what God has been trying to teach me throughout this season, it's going to be a lifelong teaching, and I'm hoping that you understand this as well, is that any control we think we have is not real. When life happens, you'll learn quick how much control we actually don't have, how much control that he actually has. So if we want to walk in humility, if we want to have childlike faith, it starts with faith. That if he says when we're humble, he'll lift us up, that he actually means when we're humble, he will lift us up. So when we try to act in our pride to get that control back, what we're really saying is, God, I don't trust that you are going to do what you said you're going to do, and you're going to be the God that you say you're going to be. I don't trust it. So I'm going to do it myself. That's why pride is all of our Achilles heel. Pride tries to take that control back for ourselves when God says, you need to be dependent on me the way a child is dependent on someone else. That's what we're called to do. Walk in humility. Be fully dependent on him. Let's pray. Dear God, we just come before you humbly, in full surrender, to release the control that we think we have, to rely fully on you. Dear God, I pray that you help us with our faith. Help us to trust in you, to have faith in you, to have faith that we believe what you say, that when we walk in humility, we make it about others and helping other people, that you will lift us up. Help us to fully trust in you. God, this week I pray that you bring to mind all the people that showed humility in our lives, that got us to where we are today. And dear God, I pray that you help us to realize the people in our lives that we can now pour into. God, I pray that you help us to walk in the humility that you've called us, that you modeled for us. In your son's name, amen. Let's stand, let's sing this closing song together.